Welcome to the Independent Producers Organization live showcase. Tonight we're going to have a call in from Frosty Wooldridge, who I guess is on the line right now, and he has taken off. He went on vacation this summer. To him, a vacation is bicycling across the United States. It seems like a huge amount of work, plus trying to figure out how to stay places overnight and all that. Okay, Frosty, are you there? Hello? Frosty?
Joy of
there we go.
The Christmas season. So thank you very much for having me on tonight.
No, that's great. I can't wait to hear more about your trip and where all you bicycled. You know, I have to make a comment. People say, "Oh, where are the facts?" Well, I listen to see these detective shows, and a one-person eyewitness can just total out the bad guy, but you are a total eyewitness to everything that you record about. That's what's so interesting. So,
well, thank you, Richard.
Go ahead.
One of the things that's formed my life and certainly formed my understandings is in the last 46 years, I've had the honor and the good fortune and the time to be able to travel around the world across 6 continents and all of these countries to see everything firsthand at 12 miles an hour. And as a long-distance touring bicyclist, I was able to see things that most Americans and most people on the planet don't get to see. They can see them on newscasts. They may see them secondhand. They may read about them in the newspaper or whatever. They might watch pictures. But when you get to pedal your bicycle through Asia and you get to see the poverty, and you get to see the overpopulation, you get to see the pollution, you get to see the intractable pollution of the rivers like the Yangtze and the Ganges, or the river coming out of Peru, or the river coming out of São Paulo in Brazil, and you see all of the garbage and the trash. And if you scuba dive in the oceans, you get to see the Great Pacific Garbage Patch with 100 million tons of plastic floating on an island the size of Texas, right out there 1,000 miles off of San Francisco. When you get to see this stuff over a lifetime of the last 50 years, I'm 70 years old, and I'm also still thankful that this summer could pedal a bicycle 4,100 miles across the country because I stay in great shape. I eat a vegetarian vegan diet, so I have a very clear heart and vessels. And I exercise to make sure I keep my body in great shape so I can do these kinds of things. And that's what happened to me in my life as a teacher, taking off in the summers on a bicycle to explore the world. And so it's been a very fortunate life, and I'm thankful that I'm still here. I'm thankful I didn't get run over by the millions of cars that have passed me and that could have run me over. And I'm thankful for a clear mind and the ability to write about it, and that's why I try to bring Americans the information of what's coming. And for those of you who have seen my latest video, The Perfect Storm Gathering Over America, it's a 42-minute video showing the consequences of adding 100 million immigrants to America in the next 30 years. On an environmental front, certainly on a quality of life front, a standard of living front, a sociological, linguistic, cultural, multicultural front, and also as to resources such as water, energy, and resources themselves. So I've really had quite a journey, and I'm hoping to bring enough information back to all Americans that we can stop mass immigration into America. Canada needs to do the same. So does Europe, and so does Australia, and all Western countries, because, as I've said in the past, the third world keeps adding 80 million new babies, net gain, every year, without pause and without stopping, And so there's no end to the line of desperate people that want to leave all of their countries that are overloaded and move into ours. We need to help them in their own countries, but we cannot continue to keep importing them into our countries. And that's the major thrust of all my work and all the books that I've written on overpopulation and immigration.
You know, from a logical standpoint, you have to think that people worldwide are reproducing exponentially. And
Right.
it hasn't been going that fast up till now. I mean, World War II and all that. Now it just seems like people can reproduce worldwide like mad. And of course, when they come to this country, they're trying especially hard to make their families of children bigger. But that's just part of it. You just have to think that there are so many people coming on all the time, and there's nothing to stop them. I was just thinking the other day about this global gag rule, which allowed us to spend more money for birth control worldwide, and I'm not sure where that is now. I was going to contact Planned Parenthood and see, because that was a very important part of working with population and trying to deal with it. But go ahead. I want you to tell a little more even about Houston, or?
Well, I certainly can. You know, one of the things that most Americans don't realize, and they are not up to date on, and they don't even think about, is that back in 1963, the United States was 193 million people, and there were no traffic gridlock in the cities. There weren't overcrowding. People weren't being pushed and shoved around. New York City was less than half of the 8.3 million that it is right now. When I lived in San Diego, California in 1965 for a short time, there was only 15 million people in California. Well, today there's 38 million people in California. And as I said, California adds 1,655 people every single day of the year, and that's net gain, and 98% of that is legal and illegal immigration. And again, the United States continues to pour in over 100,000 legal immigrants every 30 days. That's 1.2 million per year, give or take a few thousand. And the average of illegal aliens coming in, according to Steve Camarata at CIS.org, is 500,000 per year. So when you look at those numbers, that's 1.7 million, somewhere between 1.6 and 1.7 million new additions to the United States, net gain every year, on our way to adding 139 million more people by 2050, which is only 33 years from now. And that includes, of course, the birth rates, the chain migration, the diversity visas, and the regular migration that's coming in, and doesn't even include the illegal immigration that's coming in. That's not even factored into these. And if you want to verify these numbers, go to PewResearchCenter.org, P-E-W, researchcenter.org, U.S. population projections by Fogel-Martin, which you can find at FAIRUS.org, FAIRUS.org, and or you can see the same on Roy Beck at NumbersUSA.org. And for those of you who get really sobered by these facts, these demographic facts, these population figures, look them up, and you will find that this is what's coming. It's not if this is coming, this is what is coming. And so what I'm hoping to do in the United States, in my work as a journalist and a speaker, and I just spoke in Houston 2 weeks ago, people just chopped their jaws when they saw the Immigration, Gumballs, and Poverty 5-minute video by Roy Beck at NumbersUSA.org. It shows that the Third World is adding 80 million. That's 80 million new babies net gain every year. And in fact, since 1970, when we had Earth Day and all the first world countries started having only 2 children per woman, on average, the Third World decided to just steam ahead, and so the world population jumped from 3.5 billion, B as in boy, billion. It's now jumped to 3.8 billion, and that's now 7.3 billion people on the planet. And so
That's right.
you have to understand that this exponential growth rate has multiplied times 2 in just the last 50 years. And it's going to multiply again by 3 billion more within the next 30 years because it's called exponential growth. When you have more people having babies and you have more of a massive population load, then those babies become exponential growth. And, of course, we're already into overshoot. We're doing so much environmental damage to the planet, whether it's the oceans or whether it's the 100 million sharks being killed every year by humans, which has been going on for well over 27 years now, as reported in Life magazine way back in 1990. I've got a copy of it, in fact. And Julia Whitty in One Earth magazine, who's verified that 100 million sharks are still being killed right now in 2017 every year. And the fact that human encroachment is killing 100 species per day. 100 species per day. You look that up. Norman Myers, Meyers, of the Oxford University, a 40-year study. Norman Myers on the extinction rates. We're now in the 6th extinction session. 6 extinction sessions. Before this extinction session, we've had 5 extinction sessions, all that were created by asteroid hitting the Earth and the all-consuming fires and clouds, and then the ice ages and all that. And when those things happened, they were natural. Well, what's happening now is man-made, human-made, and it's really consequential because we're losing. In fact, the Harvard professor E.O. Wilson, who is brilliant, said that humanity could snuff out at least 1/3 of all animal and plant life on this planet by 2050, which is only 33 years from now. And in fact, by next month, it'll only be 32 years from now. So we have to ask ourselves, Richard, and everyone listening tonight, do you want your children to inherit this kind of a planet? Do you want them to inherit the poisoned planet, the poisoned oceans, the poisoned soils, the Monsanto GMOs? Do you want them to have the carbon footprint? Do you want them to have the consequences of the quality of life degraded to that of Beijing or Shanghai or any of the Mexico City? Because if we continue on this path, that's exactly what we're going to give our children, Richard.
Yeah, that's right. I know you talked about Africa and how I mean, that's just one of the things we are going to talk about tonight.
Yes.
Africa, and I'm trying to visualize those people getting so hungry they start eating all those incredible animals over there. It's just sickening to think about that. And speaking of the number of people, I just saw a sequence over there in Africa recently. It's just young kids, all the way from 4 years to 10 or 11, all over the place. They're just everywhere. And I'm thinking to myself, whenever these young people grow up, and then we're going to be out of oil. We're going to be out of oil, and they don't realize that. Not that water isn't going to be a problem, but oil will just start being so expensive, it'd be prohibitive to get it. And so oil is going to be a big problem. And I see them saying, well, here they keep having babies, and more babies, and more babies. And I'm thinking, that's what's going to happen to them. They're going to be part of running out of oil, and some very bad times and conflicts that are going to come up. And it's not like, I think the word is, it's not going to be pretty.
Well, it certainly isn't. And let me follow up on the crisis of oil, because we have used about 55% of all oil on the planet, and that oil at some point in this century is going to be gone, and it will exhaust itself. And thus far, there's no alternative energy on the planet, no technology that's going to replace the extraordinary energy slave called oil. Certainly not. You're not going to get it from solar panels. You're not going to get it from wind machines. You're certainly not going to get it from coal-fired plants, and you're not going to get it from nuclear because it's not going to have enough to replace oil. So then, how do we replace oil to fill the tractors, to plant the food, to harvest the food, and to transport the food, of course? And that's going to be the challenge because we won't have that oil to do that, and we don't have anything at this point that's going to replace that. And so let me read these two quotes. I think they're so important.
Okay.
First of all, Nobel laureate Dr. Henry W. Kendall said, and I'm quoting, "If we don't halt population growth with the justice and compassion, it will be done for us by nature, brutally and without pity, and will leave a ravaged world." That's pretty sobering.
Okay.
And you have to understand that he's a Nobel laureate, a brilliant mind, brilliant man. And here's the energy one that I think is so important. I'm quoting James Howard Kunstler in The Long Emergency, and I've met the man. He's brilliant. "The cheap oil age created an artificial bubble of plenitude for a period not much longer than a human lifetime. So I hazard to assert that as oil ceases to be cheap and the world reserves move toward depletion, we will be left with an enormous population that the ecology of the earth will not support. The journey back toward non-oil population homeostasis will not be pretty. We will discover the hard way that population hypergrowth was simply a side effect of the oil age. It was a condition, not a problem with a solution. That is what happened, and we are stuck with it," unquote. That's pretty sobering because there's no way to escape that. In fact, here's another quote by the great energy expert Walter Youngquist. He said, "As we go from this happy hydrocarbon bubble we have reached now to a renewable energy resource economy, which we must do in this century, will the civil part of civilization survive? As we both know, there is no way that alternative energy sources can supply the amount of per capita energy we enjoy now through oil, much less the 10 billion people expected on this planet by 2050. And energy is what keeps this game going. We are involved in a Faustian bargain, selling our economic souls for the luxurious life of the moment, but sooner or later the price has to be paid," unquote. I hope those two sink in because they are going to, if you're over 30 years old and you're going to live at least somewhere around 2050, 2060, you're going to be in the middle of this massive human pileup when oil exhausts itself, because the top experts, whether it's the Hubbert curve, you can talk to Richard Heinberg, who is brilliant with Peak Everything. You can talk or read Scarcity by Chris Clugston. You can certainly read The Long Emergency by James Howard Kunstler. They all come to a very scientific reality conclusion that oil will be exhausted sometime in the next 30 to 40 years. And at that point, there will be no way that we're going to be able to grow enough food and have enough arable land and certainly water to take care of the 10 billion people on this planet. From the 7.3 billion we have right now, we're headed for 10 billion. There's no way that we're going to be able to sustain them, feed them, water them, and all that goes with it. No chance.
Addressing the oil situation, if people would just think for a minute how many years, millions of years, it took for the oil to come to be where we could get to it and have it and use it up, and then it's going to be gone. I just, people don't think about it. Less people would solve everything. If they just
well, that's true. And let me really bring this home to you. I want everybody that's listening tonight, because I hope you're going to be joining numbersusa.org and capsweb.org and certainly carryingcapacitynetwork.org and start faxing in the pre-written letters. It's all for free to your senators and congressmen in order to stop mass immigration into our country, stop the chain migration, stop the diversity visas, cut immigration down to virtually nothing, zero if you will. The key is we have to band together, and there's 7 million people in these three organizations right now, and we need you to be a part of that. And the key here is this. How much oil do we burn every day across the globe? I mean, most people don't know that the United States burns about 19.5 million barrels.
Yeah.
But the Earth burns 94 million barrels of oil all throughout the world. But what is 94 million barrels? Well, let me give you an idea. A barrel is a drum, actually, 42 gallons to the drum of an oil drum. And at 20 inches at the bottom, if you take 94 million barrels and you set them side by side in a belt at 20 inches in diameter for each barrel, you will form a belt that is long enough to stretch around the equator 25,000 miles. 25,000 miles at the equator. That's a kind of belt, and it is more than 25,000 miles, but that's how much oil that we fill up every 24 hours at 12 midnight, and at 12:02 seconds past 12 midnight, we start burning down all those 94 million barrels of oil. And of course, as you can imagine, the carbon footprint is causing extraordinary consequences in the biosphere. It's called catastrophic climate destabilization. What that means is the particulate and the carbon is being absorbed by the oceans and warming them, and also the particulate is acidifying those oceans. It's in my book, America on the Brink, the next added 100 million Americans, and this is destabilizing the oceans, and that's why you get Katrina, that's why you get Harvey, that's why you get Haiyan typhoon, that's why you get Sandy hurricane, and more to come. They're exacerbated to 200-mile-an-hour winds. And so now let's go back to the oil. 94 million barrels a day. Well, right now, China, with 1.35 billion people, is putting 27 million new cars on the roads every year. 27 million new cars on the roads, that's net gain, and it is predicted by the projections of what the oil is being used in China that by 2030, that's only 17 years from now, China itself will be burning 98 million barrels of oil per day. You can look that up, The Long Emergency by James Howard Kunstler. So we're now burning 94 million barrels of oil a day. 13 years from now, the world will be burning well over 200 million barrels of oil per day. Can you imagine the environmental consequences of that much carbon, that much particulate being exhausted into the biosphere? And then can you imagine when it all dries up at such an extraordinary rate of speed, what are we going to do? Well, you see, the government right now of the United States, the governments of all the countries in the world, don't give this a second thought. Everybody thinks that they can continue to have more babies, expand population, and it's all going to work out. Well, the facts speak otherwise, and tonight you are getting a full dose of all of my research over a lifetime, my two books, Immigration's Unarmed Invasion, Deadly Consequences, America on the Brink, The Next Added 100 Million Americans. Those two books, they're on Amazon. If you want to really sober yourself up, read them. Get them out of the library. You also have Richard Heinberg's book, Peak Everything. Chris Clugston with Scarcity. His book shows how we're running out of all the minerals and metals to like zinc and like lead to fill our batteries, to make our batteries work, or our cell phones to work. We're at exhaustion levels for half of those 80 minerals and metals around the world. We're literally raping the planet for the last portions of this. But as the population grows, there's no way that we can keep having everybody with a battery for their car or parts for their car or their cell phone or all of the electronics that is needed and all the materials that are part of all this technology. It just can't be done. So we're really at a crossroads here. Where do we want our species to go? Where do we want it to end up? What do we want to bequeath to our children? Richard, does anyone appreciate that what we're bequeathing to our children right now is going to be a complete living nightmare?
That's right. I'm just overwhelmed every time I think about it. Okay, I think 20, 30, 40 years. You just don't want to be here. And I know these babies I see are going to experience it. And they can't stop it. You can't stop the whole thing and cut people down all at once. And yet, that's almost what needs to be done. People need to realize what you've been, among other things, the things that you have been talking, like in Houston, such as that.
Yep.
That would be very beneficial if people could just realize the importance of that. And people I've talked to aren't aware there's an overpopulation crisis. I don't think our legislators in Congress, they either don't know or they don't care or can't grasp what needs to be done. I think they want to do something else. There are too many other things that they can think about that they want to deal with. So,
well, I will state unequivocally that every crisis, every problem facing all of America today finds its foundation in human overpopulation. Give you an example. The ghettos of Chicago, the ghettos of New York, the ghettos of Atlanta, the ghettos of Denver, the ghettos of Houston, the poor people that are struggling and literally suffering in California. The reason they're struggling is because there are so many people, 38 million people in California, that there's no way to solve the problems of all of the poor, all of the illiterate, all of the starving. I don't know if most people realize it, but according to feedingamerica.org, go to feedingamerica.org, 1 in 6 American children doesn't get enough food to eat. The nutrition is not there. And that's happening here in the richest country in the world. And yet, we're having these problems. And they're only going to get worse as we continue to add, again, another 100 million immigrants within the next 3 decades, which is just 30 years. I mean, and the run-up to that is going to be even worse because it will exacerbate every problem, whether it's air pollution, traffic gridlock, cost of water, cost of gas, cost of food, cost of your heat, cost of running your cities. It's all going to magnify and explode exponentially because the greater the numbers, the greater the financial consequences, the greater loss of quality of life, and the greater loss of standard of living. Dr. Otis Graham, a man who just died last week, wrote a book called Unguarded Gates, and I knew him very well. He was from Stanford, and he said, and I quote, "Most Western elites continue urging the wealthy West not to stem the migrant tide that adds 80 million new babies net gain annually to the planet, but to absorb our global brothers and sisters until their horrid ordeal has been endured and shared by all, 10 billion humans packed onto an ecologically devastated planet," unquote.
That's a sarcastic thing, isn't it?
Well, it's a statement in his book that shows you that there are factions in this country that they want to have more immigration. They want to sell more homes. They want to sell more cars. They want to sell more clothing. They want to sell more bling, things, and all that goes with that because they can then drive a BMW or their latest fancy car, or they can fly a Lear jet, or they can have a $5 million home or a $10 million home or whatever, while the rest of us are down here in the traffic gridlock, breathing all of the... I'll give you an example. Here in Denver, where I live, you come out of the mountains, beautiful skies, clear blue everything, white-capped mountains, beautiful beyond belief, and then there's a giant black, soupy, brown cloud that's literally like a giant umbrella, several miles thick, that engulfs all of Denver. Oh. And every breath you take as you sit and breathe there in Denver, you're breathing all of this carbon particulate, all of the exhaust from the millions of automobiles, the millions of houses. and all of the other chemicals that are being expelled into the air, and yet no one is stopping the growth of Denver or Colorado. It's going to continue to grow from the 5.1 million, 5.1 million to 10 million within the next 30 years. And I've tried to get on PBS, I've tried to get on 60 Minutes, I've tried to get on NPR, I've tried to get on all of these media shows. I've tried to get with Leslie Stahl, Steve Kroft, Scott Pelley. I've tried to get on Meet the Press. I've tried to get on Face the Nation. I've tried to get on Laura Ingle with the Ingle Angle. I've tried to get on Fox News. I figured Tucker Carlson would have me on there to really bring this information out, and they won't touch it. In fact, they run from it. So, Richard,
right.
Every person listening tonight, you're all going to be affected by this in the next 3 decades. And the run-up to it's going to be just as bad. Why don't we get this discussion onto the national docket? And the reason that I would ask you is we need to do that. If I had 10,000 or 100,000 listeners tonight, write into 60M, that's minutes, 60 Minutes, that's cbsnews.com, and demand that we have a national discussion on where our society is going, our civilization is going, and you need to talk with top experts like Dr. Jack Alpert at Skill, skil.org, certainly Dave Paxson of worldpopulationbalance.org, Frosty Wooldridge at howtolivealifeofadventure.com, Joanne Weidman at capsweb.org, that's capsweb.org, certainly David Durham of carryingcapacitynetwork.org. These are Chris Clugston of Scarcity, James Howard Kunstler, The Long Emergency, Richard Heinberg. We've got Governor Lamb of Colorado is extraordinary in his ability to bring this message. We need to have all these individuals speaking on the biggest platforms possible here in the United States to get a national discussion going, Richard. Because without everyone jumping in on this, my lone voice is not going to make any difference, and all their lone voices won't make any difference. But if we get together, we can create a national debate on where our civilization is headed.
That's right. You know, I wanted to back up to the weather situation.
Sure.
Now, there's probably not going to be any cessation of tornadoes or cold ice storms and all that. From everything I've been able to gather, the degree, in other words, that they're so much more serious, like Katrina, is because of this destabilization caused by so many people.
Right.
That's what I think is the problem. I think these fires in California, I think, why is the wind so much stronger than it usually is? And I think that's probably one of the reasons. More destabilization caused. In other words, they're probably going to have some fires, but to have them like they are recently, it's just hard to believe.
Well, again, as I said, when I worked with the top scientists at the National Science Foundation in Antarctica, I wrote a book about it, and it's called Antarctica, An Extreme Encounter. And when I was down there, they literally, this was 20 years ago this year, in fact, I left in 2017, and 1997 and 98, I was down on the ice. And during my time down there, working as a journalist for the Antarctic Sun, I got to see the climate change models. And again, the one misnomer that Vice President Al Gore brought in his constitutional the inconvenient truth was he called it global warming. He shouldn't have called it global warming because you can make so many mistakes on connotating that. What he should have said was we're facing catastrophic climate destabilization.
Right.
Catastrophic climate destabilization, which I use in my book. And the key here is that we are warming those oceans at such a rate of speed, burning that 94 million barrels of oil, but literally the U.S. burns, I think, 3.7 billion tons of coal every year. China puts a new coal-fired electrical plant online every week. That's 52 a year. So they're probably burning, 10 billion tons of coal every year. And, of course, all the wood that's being burned. So natural gas is being burned. So you can see we're doing something with the unbelievable hydrocarbon burning to the point where we are creating this massive destabilization of the biosphere. And as you add more numbers of people that need to be heated, and more food, and more tractors, and more cars, and more cities, and more smokestacks, you can see that every person added to the United States is going to make more damage, and every person added to the planet is going to be more damage.
That's right. Even when a new child is born, they have to almost have to set aside 1 acre of arable land. It can't be used anymore for that. They take up so much down. Not to mention down in California.
Oh, well, let me add to that. It's called ecological footprint.
Yeah.
And again, somebody living in Ethiopia that has an outhouse and a hut and a toilet, or just the ground that he uses 0.4 acres of land to sustain himself and his garden. When that Ethiopian moves over to America, it's not 1 acre, it's 25.4 acres. It's called ecological footprint. It's the amount of land that must be used and destroyed in order to support an American citizen, 25.4 acres. Go to allspecies.org to verify that, and that means that you have to build a house, you got to build roads, you got to have acreages of plots for land and food, you got to use up more water, you've got to create firehouses, you got to have baseball diamonds, you put more pavement down, you destroy. As a matter of fact, with 100 million more immigrants added to America in the next 30 years, times 25.4 acres of land that has to be taken out of wilderness, you have 2.54 billion acres will be destroyed of wilderness here in the United States in the next 30 years. And, where do the animals go when you take away their habitat like that? And I'll tell you where they go. They go extinct. At some point, the bald eagle will go extinct. So at some point, the moose will go extinct. At some point, the mountain lion is going to go extinct. We're actually right now losing 250 species every year in the United States. That's 2,500 every 10 years from encroachment, because here in the United States we're adding 3.1 million people every year, and they are, take 3.1 million times 25.4 acres, and you can see we're taking out literally millions of acres to make way for all of these Americans coming, or people coming into our country. And what's ironic about that is that we chose a stable population back in 1970 by only having 2 children per woman. And so really, in the end, it's the unbelievable irresponsibility of Congress and those 535 congressional critters who are pretending to lead this country in a responsible way, but in fact are highly irresponsible and literally leading us toward our own national suicide via immigration.
Okay, I know what you're saying. I have to stop and think when you say critters, but I know you're right.
Well, it's 435 House of Representatives members, and that's 100 senators. And it totals 535 men and women who aren't doing a damn thing to move this society toward a sustainable future. That is a fact.
They aren't thinking about this. I don't know how they get by without hearing about it, without knowing about it.
Well, voices like mine that are literally based on facts and a lifetime of experiences are completely ignored and, in fact, suppressed. I thought 60 Minutes, I thought they would, I've written every one of those people on 60 Minutes. I've written to their producers. I used to write Charlie Rose's producers. He, of course, is not going to be doing too much anymore. I've written Matt Lauer. I've sent my books in. I've sent the graphs and the figures. I've shown all of the facts. I've shown the 10 things that we're facing water shortages, energy shortages, resource shortages, arable land shortages, the gridlock, the air pollution. I've gone all the way down the line on all these, the species extinction, and they simply ignore and or avoid or suppress any discussion. You won't hear one single discussion like this on any major show in the United States. PBS, NPR, CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC, CBS, none of them will touch it. They are absolutely either oblivious or they are paid to make sure that they don't speak to it. They don't interview anybody that has any. Right here, there's a guy named Bruce Finley for the Denver Post. He's the environmental editor. I've tried to interview with him for 15 years now, and he absolutely avoids any discussion or interview with me, but he will interview all of the people that are going to, how are they going to solve the water shortages in Denver? How are they going to solve the gridlock traffic? How are they going to solve the air pollution? He goes to all the standard experts, and none of them will give the solution that actually has to be put into place, and that is limiting and stopping growth in Denver, Colorado, so that we can have a stable, clean air and clean city and drivable traffic. But instead, keep growing Denver, and Denver's going to go from its current 2.4 million to well over 5 million within the next 30 years.
Wow.
And I don't get a word in edgewise, and neither do Governor Lamb can't even get a word in edgewise. And he's a governor, for heaven's sakes, and he's highly respected. But you can see how they're shutting us down.
No, we haven't covered welfare at all, because welfare, I mean, these people in Congress should, if they could cut down on some of the money that's going out to the welfare of the immigrants that are coming in, especially ones that are bleeding cities dry, I just don't understand why they don't think that's an important place to cut down. They come from a country where they weren't getting welfare, and they come here and bleed us dry.
Well, that's correct. And here's what some of the reasons for that are. The big capitalistic moneymakers and corporate execs know that every time you bring somebody else into the country, they got to be fed 3 meals a day, they got to have clothing, they got to have a house, they got to buy a car, or they got to have a car bought for them.
Everything.
They're going to use public transportation, so it creates more gross national product. Okay, and so they don't care what the final result is, that we have destroyed our total civilization and our sustainability levels. They only think about the bottom line. And as was said by Youngquist, he just said this is a Faustian bargain, that we are enjoying the financial luxury of the moment, but at some point the price has to be paid. So when you and I talk all of this rational, logical, fact-based reality that we're facing, you also have all those big moneyed interests up there that don't give a damn about the facts, don't care about the future, and simply don't worry about future generations because it doesn't bother them.
They just want to be paid. That's what they want, their income. That's why they're afraid to hear anything about less population, because they want to keep getting their money. That includes Congress.
That's right. They want it. That's exactly right.
It's very unfortunate that they think like that and don't realize the truth. And I would encourage people in general that are, childbearing and all that, go to Planned Parenthood. That's what they're there for. And get some help so we can cut down. You really shouldn't, with having 7 billion people, probably shouldn't have more than one child, and the best number is 0. And if you can get this information from Planned Parenthood, that's great. And another thing I just wanted to cover briefly, I still keep looking at this one thing from 2015 where it said a record 65 million people displaced around the globe. Translated, that means homeless. And that's not to do with overpopulation. It just has to be.
It's totally because of overpopulation, because people are fighting for resources, they're fighting for water, they're fighting for food, and they're in what is called overshoot. They've overshot the carrying capacity of the finite land in the countries they came from. In other words, why can't we all live in Antarctica? Because there's no food ability to grow there. There's lots of water, but you can't unfreeze it because it's 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 below zero all the time. Why can't we populate? There's only 26 million in Australia. I've cycled around the entire continent, circumnavigated Australia, and the reason that Australia can't take any more people is because it's 95% desert. There's no arable land. It's all in sand. It's an old continent, and it doesn't have the micronutrients in the soil, and it doesn't have any water to water any of the desert. So it is limited by carrying capacity. So at some point, if you tried to shove 10, 20, 30, 50 million more people into Australia, they'd all be starving to death because there's no way to feed them, because there's no water and there's no arable land. So right now, and I said in my four-part series, it's called The Deadliest Birth Rate for All Humanity. Look it up online, folks. There's many places that carry it. Or even just email me and I'll just send it to you, frostyw@juno.com. But Africa, right now, an incredible continent with more resources than anybody can imagine, has 1.1 billion people. B as in boy, billion people. By 2050, at current growth rate and birth rates, as figured out by the United Nations, they're going to hit 2 billion. 2 billion, B as in boy, billion. And then before the end of the century, which is only 87 years from now, they're going to hit, and this is a reality that has been projected by the UN population projections, they're going to hit 4 billion. Again, B as in boy, 4 billion. India, at 1.2 billion people, 25 billion. It's got 1.25 billion, adds between 16 and 18 million a year, net gain. They don't use any birth control because of their religions and their culture and their religion. They're going to overtake China within 30 years, and they're going to hit 1.55 billion. They're already starving in the streets right now. They can't solve anything. They got rivers. The Ganges is a sewer pipe to the ocean with a 20,000 square mile dead zone, poisoning all the rest of the oceans. Is that going to get better? No, it's going to get worse. And then China, with 1.35 billion, even with one child per family, grows by 8 million per year because all those women having one child, there's 1.35 billion people there. Half of them are women. It's called population overrun or population momentum. They're adding 8 million net gain per year, and they'll hit 1.5 billion. So you're seeing no end to this incredible growth to the planet, but part 4 of that series is, who are the recipient nations of all this human overload? 1, America. 2, Canada. 3, Europe. 4, Australia. We're the ones that are taking over all this excess population load. I mean, China is immigrating and chain migrating into so much into Canada and America today. Anybody been to Vancouver? Vancouver, I was just there this summer. Vancouver is no longer a Canadian city. It is taken over by the Chinese. They're chain migrating all of their Chinese families, and literally at some point there will be a new China there in British Columbia, and all the Canadians will be run out totally. Well, that's happening right now in Miami. It's happening in Los Angeles. The Mexicans are taking over. The Spanish language is taking over. I was just down in Texas, and there were 5 Spanish-language TVs right there in Houston, Texas. Spanish all over Miami. And for those of you who don't know this, New York City right now has got nearly 40% foreign-born. 800 languages in New York City. Does anybody think we're going to be able to sociologically stay together as a civilization with 800 different languages, with another 100 million people with 196 different world views from all those countries they're coming from, and 196 different languages, and of course 196 different cultures? Richard, this thing is so huge. The only way to solve it at this point is to shut down all U.S. immigration, period.
That's right.
And hope to God we survive.
That's right. Hey, I just wanted to mention, so I didn't forget, I'm going to hold it up to the camera here. I got a stack of all the stuff that you've been sending me, and it's incredible stuff. End of oil, Fukushima over in Japan, exponential growth, poisoning the earth, starvation of animals, traffic gridlock, plastic onslaught, as to how much damage all the plastic we use are. Human starvation, animal impact by becoming extinct, endless population growth. I enjoy reading all this stuff that you sent, and it's available, and I know you have it probably in your website, and it's really very definitely appreciated. So
well, you're most welcome. Unfortunately, it's almost a chronicling of the decline of America and the American civilization. And I pointed out. I mean, I've written so much stuff on this. And the thing is, it's all fact-based. None of this is just pulled out of the air. Everything I write is fact-based. This is what we're dealing with. This is what we're facing. I bet everybody listening tonight across America and wherever you are, you've got to be shaking your heads. But I will say this. If you're going to be a spectator, say you love the Seahawks, say you love the San Francisco 49ers, say you love the New York Giants, the one thing as a spectator, you can scream and yell and jump up and down and curse and drink a beer and all your things you're going to do if you're a spectator in the stands. You do nothing to change the course of the game. So I'm going to ask every one of you, who is your hero? Who is it Teddy Roosevelt? Is it John Muir? Is it Henry David Thoreau? Is it Jack London? Is it whomever? Susan B. Anthony, Abigail Adams, or Jane Goodall? Whomever is your hero, that was their time. This is yours. I would invite every one of you. Write the letters into 60 Minutes. Write to Fox News, Tucker Carlson. Tell him to interview Frosty Woolridge. Tell him to interview Jack Alpert. Have him interview all of the names I've given you in the books, and you will start a discussion, debate here in America on where we want to go. But if you just sit by, do nothing, and watch this thing, you're going to sit by and watch your own children suffer greater than anything you ever imagined when the water runs out. Certainly in California and 7 other states, Florida included, Georgia included, Texas included. When the energy runs out, gasoline is gone, what's going to happen to your kids? So the key here is, I'd like to see my 2 boys have a decent life and have a viable life and a viable civilization in which to thrive. So I'm really inviting every one of you to take action and start writing and speaking and going to Tucker Carlson at Fox News and encourage him to interview yours truly or all the rest of these men and women that I've talked about, and we can get a national discussion. But if you just sit there like a spectator, unfortunately this is a constitutional republic. Thank goodness it is a constitutional republic. The only way to change course in a constitutional republic is if the citizens, that's you and me, take action. So it's up to you. We are today's Ben Franklin's, we're today's Abigail Adams, we're today's Susan B. Anthony. And for those of you who don't know Susan B. Anthony, she's the one that got women the right to vote back in 1917 or 18. So that's the key. Richard, it's up to us. We're in this society. We're not going to get out of this society. We better darn well do something to make sure that this society is handed over to our kids as a viable civilization.
That's right. Say, did you hear this thing? I think it was in France, where the EU, European United, is that what that stands for, is wanting all the other countries to take in a whole lot more immigrants. It's almost like they were demanding that they did. No one says, go back home and practice birth control. Go back home and don't have so many kids. No one says that. They need to be sent back where they came from. They're coming here and abusing everything we have. The amount of money is $330 billion. is how much could be going out for the welfare now.
Oh, it's more than that.
It's
I mean,
overwhelming.
the welfare rolls, the 48 million on food stamps right now. You've got I don't know how many million on Section 8 housing. You've got all of this medical care for all of these people who have no ability to function on their own.
Right.
We've got 42 million Americans who are functionally illiterate. Think about that. 48 million on food stamps, 42 million who are functionally illiterate. You've got 350,000 anchor babies every year. We have to pay for K through 12 for those children to be educated. We have to pay for their breakfasts and their lunches. We have to pay for their health care. We have to pay for their mother's housing when she came here illegally. You have to understand that we're paying for the fact that all these illegals that are sending money back at $120 billion a year, that money's all been given to them under the table by corrupt employers. So the amount of money that we're spending on immigration, both legal and illegal, is mind-boggling, into the billions and really into the trillions over time. And that's why we are $20 trillion in debt right now, and we're literally seeing fracturing of our schools because nobody here in Denver, 173 different languages, 173. We can't teach 100. We don't have teachers that can speak 173 different languages. And so we're turning these kids out, and they're totally illiterate. And so what do illiterate kids do? They join gangs, and they sell drugs, and or the girls get pregnant, and that's what they do. And then they go right back on welfare or into the jails. We're paying for 2.3 million people in prisons right now nationwide. We're losing 13 kids every hour, 24/7, to drug overdoses. And yet we let Mexico sell us $50 billion in drugs every year. $50 billion, B as in boy. Look it up.
Boy.
That's what's going on in this country. I know all this stuff. I researched it. I'm a journalist. And I bring it to you, and if you sit by and let it just continue, then it's going to get worse times 2, then times 3, and then it's going to get so worse, so bad, there's no way to solve any of it.
We've got about just a little over 1 minute. I just wanted to comment that the Balance, look up Balance. They also doing their part in trying to deal with immigration and overpopulation. So I would,
Right.
and I definitely want to thank you for calling in. And I know that there was a misunderstanding there, but
No worries.
I just really, this has been a great program. I can just tell you that right now. That's all there is to it. So
Well, thank you. I hope that every American could listen to this program because this is our future. We can either change it toward the good, the positive, and a thriving future for our children, or we can turn it into another China or another India or another Mexico. And I can tell you, I've been to those countries. We do not want to become another Mexico, Bangladesh, China, or India. It's hopeless, it's helpless, and it's so out of control, there's no way to solve the problems of those countries.
Okay, thank you, and thanks again for calling in. I guess we're going to a break here now. And thanks again, Frosty, for calling in. Okay, we're back. Thank you very much. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our guest, Robert Reynolds, running for the 5th District Congressional candidate. I didn't say that exactly right, but I'm going to essentially turn it over to him so you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and where that area is for your congressional area.
So the 5th District is Clackamas County, Marion County, Polk County, Lincoln County, Tillamook County, a slice of Benton County, and a slice of Multnomah.
Okay.
So it's seven counties.
Wow.
Three of the 7 counties, though, voted for President Trump. If they would have won, they'll had the election. Those 3 counties would have brought President Trump to Oregon. So,
I never knew they were pinning it down that much.
Yeah, well, they pin it down to precinct if you really want, but
Okay.
I haven't gone that much into depth in my research yet. So,
Okay. Okay, well, anything else about yourself? I see you have your website, www.reynolds, the letter 4, congress.com.
yeah,
Okay.
so I'm just a blue-collar guy running for office. I'm tired of seeing what's going on in Washington, not seeing anybody change anything. Time it was we put someone who's not a politician in there that has some business experience, that knows how to negotiate and make things happen. So I have my core beliefs, or my what I won't change or what I won't vote against, but there's always room for negotiation besides those core beliefs. So
Of the things that they're working on in the Senate now, they are, right?
yes,
What are your thoughts on some of them?
I'm the pro tax. Looks like it's headed in the right direction. There's always room for change, but the overall picture from what we can see right now looks good. Being able to carry your concealed carry in all 50 states is a good bill that just passed the House.
Okay.
So it hasn't passed the Senate yet, but at least it's going in the right direction. Right now, if you have your concealed carry in Oregon, you can't carry in California without having theirs. So, or same, in most, I think there's only like 4 other states you can carry if you have your Oregon permit. Might be a few more than that, but we specialize it instead of having just a general, if you have your permit, you should be able to carry in any state.
Okay.
So that's a big thing that just passed the House.
Okay. All right. It's kind of going sideways. A fellow was saying, I don't know if you live up in closer to Portland or not, but saying that he felt that traffic going down to Salem as a result of there being so many more people was bumper to bumper. I couldn't imagine traffic going to Salem being that bad, but that's what he said. So I don't envy you if you're trying to go back and forth to Salem.
No. I'm actually running for U.S. Congress. So when I'm elected, I'll be going to Washington, D.C.
Okay. All right. Oh,
So,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right.
So I won't have to worry about that traffic, and I'll just be flying back and forth. But traffic is a big issue. Transportation is, the funniest thing that gets me is people say they're environmentally friendly, but yet they won't expand our freeways because they said it harms the environment. Well, if you look at the studies right now, and the more cars that are running idle or stuck on the freeway, it's worse for the environment. So why don't we expand the freeway so cars can do 55? There's less emissions, more cars can go, less people stuck in traffic, less wasted time on the freeway. Helps the environment, helps out the people. There's a bunch of win-wins there. But we tend to spring past that because we're all worried about the environment instead of looking at how to solve and help the environment. We get stuck on these issues where it's like, oh, well, the only way to solve it is to stop it. Well, no, that's not true. There are other options. So
I hope that it doesn't get like it is in China. That our last person that called in has been there and seen one-way 50 lanes. And I just couldn't even grasp that. But it's a matter of if the populace wants something, you give them to them. I don't know if that's necessarily right solution in all cases, but
Well, if you look at their mass transit, though, it's packed too. So it's not like it's a one or the other. It's both. And if our transit here in Portland was developed correctly, it would be more beneficial. But the way it was developed isn't developed, in my opinion, correctly, because it doesn't have straight enough lines through residential to get you to business districts. But that's just my opinion, and I'm not an engineer, so it's just an opinion.
okay. Well, anyway, I said we'd go to this Alabama election, just to kind of get it out of the way, or whatever we wanted to do with it. I don't know how I ever thought it was going to end, but and I never saw the vote count. I don't have the slightest idea what the vote count really was. I'm always kind of interested in that.
So Mr. Jones didn't win by a large amount, but here's the issue: whether you believe in Roy Moore's people that were saying he did something wrong or not, as a party, we need to stand together as Republicans, and you work it out. You work it out before Roy Moore gets to the primaries. You do the research to find out whether there's any issues out there, but these were all allegations. There was no proof behind them. Everything that was said about him was disproved. So, but if you don't have the Republican Party behind you, though, you're going to have a harder time winning. When you have, it's kind of funny. I heard an interesting theory today about how Mitch McConnell, if he would have stayed out of the race, we would have had a completely different candidate. But because he got in and wanted someone that would, vote his way, was the reason this all came down this way, the way it did. And so that's the thing, is we need to keep the people in Washington back in Washington, and let the people in Oregon or whatever state you're in handle who runs. And that's the reason I'm running, is because right now our current congressman for the 5th district is hardly ever in Oregon. The things he voted for, the Affordable Care Act. Right now I have a $6,000 deductible, so I can't afford to use my insurance. A lady
you would have to pay out
$6,000.
the first $6,000.
Yeah.
For almost anything that happened to you.
Well, no, I need knee surgery done because I have a bad knee. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, but I can't afford to get the surgery done because it's $6,000. I don't have $6,000 to pay, to get it done.
Right. Most people don't.
Right. So, and I was talking to a lady last week at a meeting, and her deductible is $14,000, and she's paying over $600 a month for her insurance.
This is for Obamacare?
It's an Affordable Care Act insurance. So, what do we do about that? Well, we need to figure out how to get back to, making health insurance affordable. When you get government involved, it adds an extra layer, which adds the cost. And if we look back at the health insurances, they used to be non-profit, so they weren't trying to make a profit off of what they were doing, where they are now trying to make a profit. So there's issues that we can work on to solve this. I am not a big fan of the Affordable Care Act. I would personally repeal it and start over. We'd go with a health savings account, or there's some programs like in Kansas where there's networks built up by the doctors.
Okay.
And they have the plans all set up, and it's only $100 a month for your normal care. So you still have to have insurance for, like, if you have a heart attack or something like that, or cancer, but for your everyday care or monthly care, your physicals, your coughs, your broken arms, it's all covered for $100. So there's plans out there that can work, but the government's not looking at those.
Okay.
And that's what needs to change, is we need to take a wider look at what's going on and run from there.
Okay. Just right. I'm trying to think of the deductible. Just sounds overwhelming that you're talking about. What good is a plan where most of it is so expensive? I wonder.
I don't know. Even like my with my $6,000 deductible, doctor's office visits are $45.
Oh, okay.
Which is I guess it's okay, but I remember the day when the doctor's office visit copay was $10 or $5.
I remember paying $7. That took care of everything.
Yeah.
The examination, that was all I paid. Of course,
Right.
it's so long ago. It's so long ago.
It'd be interesting to figure out when and why that changed.
Right.
I mean, because that's the solution. Or that's the problem. Is I don't think we try to examine when it changed and why it changed.
Isn't it what people want? Well, I want like this echocardiogram. I want this heart examination. I want this X-ray. On and on. They want things that. Well, sometimes the doctors are afraid of lawsuits because
Right.
if they don't do those things, and so there's always that problem.
Well, and that's where you'd have an extra fee or whatever.
Right.
That makes sense. But, $600 a month for your health insurance, and then you still have your copay,
Yeah.
and then you still have your deductible. I mean, there has to be a better solution. So.
Okay, like in this knee thing, if you're 65 or something like that, you're on Medicare. Is that,
Medicaid, yeah.
Does that make a difference?
Yeah, because part of it would be covered by Medicare, but then you still have to have your secondary insurance to cover the additional cost because Medicare doesn't cover the whole cost.
Okay, all right. So it's a matter of getting into that later on.
Right.
Or,
I still got a few years before I get there, so I'm not rushing that one in at all.
Okay.
So, but yeah.
All right. Well, I don't. And what does it say in your counties? Something that you might be concerned with? Are you involved with this? Would you be involved with this money that timber money?
Yeah, that's one of the issues. When you go on my website,
Oh, okay.
Reynolds, the number 4, Congress.com, you'll see I have 6 issues on there. The first one's healthcare.
Okay.
Second one is taxes. The third is natural resources, which is covers timber, farms, fishing, and mining.
Okay.
Almost all the mines are in a national forest, so they can't be used anymore.
Oh.
So if you're into mining, there goes a big part of your income. President Trump just fixed part of that in Utah, where he reduced the size of a national monument because it was affecting mining. So there's some solutions out there, but it's just having people that would get out and do something to fix it. As far as like forestry, we used to produce 10 billion board feet of sellable timber.
Right.
Right now we're at just a little over 3 billion board feet. We used to be able to cut 50% of national forestry.
Right.
Now we're
right.
down to 10%. So the key point with that, though, is we don't have a good maintenance program for the forest. We don't go through and clean out the forest. So like the fires we had this last summer
Right.
burned longer and were affected more because, well, one, because the forestry doesn't put out wildfires because that's part of their policy, but the other is they didn't have a maintenance program in place that would reduce the timber.
Okay.
So, but I think that if our congressman would go over to the forestry department and say, hey, we need to talk about your policies for maintaining forests and maintaining wildfires, something would happen. Or call him into one of his committee meetings. He is in charge of the energy, he's on the energy caucus. So there's, I'm sure there's different meetings he could bring him into and make things happen if he wanted to. So. But the key thing about, just the natural resources is it would produce a lot more jobs. Things that involve in my county are like, I don't know if you're aware, but the Westland paper mill is closing down.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's 260 jobs going away.
Now that's because trouble getting enough.
Trouble getting enough pulp,
Yeah.
one, but they're paying $500,000 a year in property tax.
Oh.
So, if you cut part of their overhead, reduce part of their overhead, they would have opportunities to upgrade the island that the mill is on to bring it up to ADA compliant so they could lease out part of that building and have other revenue coming in so that when this shortfall happens, they would have other money coming in. The bank would not be in such a rush to call in their note.
What happened when they went to the city or state and tax people and said, hey, we can't stay there? if we have to keep paying this much?
They don't care. Well, that's being a little rough. I went in front of Clackamas County last week and I said, we need to do something.
Oh,
They looked at me because I'm just a citizen. I don't have any legal power or any legislative power yet. But they said, well, we sent people over to help them find retraining for their people.
okay.
Well, we don't want to retrain the people. We want to keep the people there and want to keep them working. We want to keep producing paper. It's the last paper mill on the West Coast.
Oh,
They had a niche. They have a niche market. They do paper for magazines. So they have a niche market. So there's a way to keep it, or there's a way for them to reopen after they close and do the bankruptcy. There's plans in place, or working on plans to reopen the mill, but they need Clackamas County, they need the city of West Linn, they need the federal government, they need the state government to get involved.
Okay.
And why wouldn't you want to help keep 260 living wage jobs
yeah.
going? The other issue, though, is the locks.
Mm-hmm.
The West Linn locks were closed down, and they were closed down incorrectly by the Army Corps of Engineers, so they can't be sold. And there's a company that would love to buy them and reopen them and use them because it affects their business. But because it was done incorrectly, and because, they're not working to help businesses,
Mm-hmm.
they can't be reopened. And that's another issue for the mill, is they used to ship their paper down river, which got trucks off the road, which helped the environment because it's cheaper to ship down river, causes less pollution. But because the locks are closed, that's just another thing that raised their overhead. So there's a bunch of issues. It's not just one single
Right.
issue. But that's where we need everybody to be involved and look at trying to keep business in Oregon instead of trying to create parks.
How far away do they have to go? Do businesses have to go to get paper now?
Midwest.
What?
Midwest.
Oh,
So your cost went up. Your cost goes up because you're shipping it farther now.
mm-hmm.
So that raises everybody's costs.
Okay.
So that means everything that uses that form of paper, it's going to cost more.
Okay.
Besides losing the 260 jobs. And
That's right. I know that's important.
oh yeah, well, and I don't know if people know, but the mill is on a little island out there.
Oh yeah. No, I've been there.
So at the south end of the island, there are 3 buildings that they could lease out if they could bring them up to the ADA compliancy. But that would mean City of West Linn would need to reduce their permit fees or do something to help them out.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a part of the property that's already used for fishing that the mill owners have given the rights to hook docks to their property. And so you can fish off these docks. It doesn't cost you anything. But they're helping the city out and the people of West Linn out to allow them fishing on the Willamette. They provided dock space or to be able to moor their docks to their property. So they're already working with the city of West Linn
Mm-hmm.
to try and help out the people so they can enjoy the river. If you don't want to try and make the whole area a park, which would be fine if it had some form of income or some way to, help create 260 living wage jobs, but it doesn't as a park. We keep it as a mill. There's thousands of things we could do to make it more successful.
Yeah. No,
So
that's right.
yeah,
Okay.
my goal is to help the economy. Whether I win or not.
Okay.
I want to see if there's any way to help these 260 jobs stay in West Linn.
That's right. Well,
Because we need production in America.
and you can tell the paper,
Yeah.
hey, here's this, and they'll probably listen to you before they listen to just plain person.
Right. Well, but that's my goal is we need production. We need to be making something here in America again, instead of ship all our jobs overseas.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I mean, this was the oldest mill in Oregon, over 100 years old.
That's right.
Had different owners, but still, there are so many things that are there that could benefit West Linn and the whole state if we can figure out how to help them reopen next year. So that's on my list of many things to do. So
Right. It sounds like something waiting to be taken care of. Have something happen.
Well, we're
That's
doing
right.
what I can. Doing what I can. I mean, it just as a citizen to get out and talk to everybody I can and trying to make something happen. The other thing that needs to change, though, is that the federal government we already talked about the forestry, but the federal government is reaching too much into our state. The navigable waterways are ran by NOAA.
Okay.
Why is a federal agency running our waterways? So the Willamette River can't be dredged because NOAA won't allow the permits for people to dredge the Willamette River.
Oh,
So,
is there a reason? Sometimes that's something I just don't know about.
well, my understanding is there's not a reason, but I'm sure there's something in the background that I haven't found yet.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, without the rivers being navigable from Westland to Salem, if we have another flood like the flood of '96, Salem
Yeah.
and Kaiser are going to get hit worse.
Okay.
Because the water's not going to have any, it's not going to be able to flow like it needs to be. So
Okay.
there's the solution is to get NOAA out of the picture. Well, because I mean, I spent plenty of time trying to find someone I could call and talk to just to find out more information. Calling back east because on their website for Oregon it has all these numbers for back east. You know, it took me over an hour to get someone to tell me who to talk to here in Oregon with a 503 number, but they still haven't called me back.
Hmm.
So, you know, why do we have a federal agency doing something that could be handled here in Oregon? You know, I mean, that's what we have our agencies here in Oregon for, is to take care of our state. So I know that they'll push the idea that, you know, our current congressman brought NOAA down from Washington down to Newport, and it's nice to have the ships in Newport, you know, to bring that business there. But just because they're there doesn't mean they need to control all of our navigable waterways. You know, there's things we need to do to take care of the ocean and you know, the environment, but let's look at how it's affecting business too. There has to be a balance. You know, it's not just one or the other. It's not black or white. It's, you know, it's gray. It's about taking care of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the problem, is sometimes we get into this scene where, or this mindset that we have to be one way or the other. You know, we're pro-environment or you know, pro-business, but we can be both. And that's my point, is I'm both. I'm pro-business and pro-environment. You know, I want clean.
Yeah.
I want clean water. I want clean drinking water. I want clean air.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want my skies to be like LA, but you know,
Right.
and I'll do what I can to make that happen. So, but let's make sure we're doing this. What we're doing helps businesses do it, not put businesses out of business to fix it. There has to be. We have to keep people employed. Otherwise, what's happening? The other thing is, you know, if we're trying to create these jobs and they're minimum wage jobs, you know, how does that help us? We need to create living wage jobs, like mill jobs. That would be electricians, millwrights, plumbers, painters, machine operators.
Okay.
You know, their starting wage job was $21 an hour. That's not a bad starting wage job.
So
So,
it's a tight labor market.
yeah.
It's I mean, this is. I always worry when it gets tight labor market. I think that means all these job prices are going to go up, and then they're going to come crashing down.
Right. Well, the dilemma
Hate
is
to see that.
we haven't taught our youth to work. We haven't allowed them to work. I mean, unless you have parents that, you know, make their kids go out and mow the lawn and work in the yard and do work for other people. You know, there's a lot of kids that are just sitting at home watching TV or playing video games that don't know how to work. Because if you talk to most businesses when they have openings, the people either don't drive, don't know how to show up on time, don't know how to dress,
Mm-hmm.
or have can't pass a drug test. So they can't drive and can't pass a drug test. Well, you can't get a job. You know, even though marijuana is legal in Oregon, it's still a lot of jobs don't allow you to have that in your system. So what do? I mean, that's where we need to figure out a solution for that, just to help out. I mean,
No,
because a
that-
lot of people that are unemployed.
drug test years ago. Never heard of such a thing.
Right.
Never heard of such a thing.
Well, if it, but that goes back to, people getting injured on the job, and, there has to be a solution, and
Okay.
that's the point. It's figuring out what the solution is instead of just going, oh well, we'll deal with it later. We'll kick the can down the road, but that doesn't help us out. We got to stop kicking the can down the road for these issues, and then actually start dealing with stuff, fixing problems. So, yeah, that's part of my campaign.
Okay. Okay. No,
You're taking care of the economy.
it's-
So,
now, just curious. Do you think this the mill down there was being run well, and that wasn't part of it? Or?
from what
I just don't know.
Right, from what I can tell, and I mean, I've only started researching this about a month ago after I heard they were closing. I met with the mill manager. He gave me a tour. We talked for over an hour
Okay.
on what was going on, what the issues were that he saw, how he thought things could be fixed, how to reduce his overhead, and, it's like most businesses. You have to invest your money sometimes to make changes, and sometimes that's hard when you're not making money.
That's
you
right.
know. So he'd said that the owners had invested, I think he said $3 million over the last couple of years, just to keep the plant open, but he said this next year he saw it making a profit.
Oh. Okay.
But the dilemma was that they buy their pulp from 3 mills up in Canada,
Oh.
and they buy them on a term, so they pay the same rate for 5 years.
Okay.
So the one mill went down. He went to the other 2 mills to see if he could get pulp. Well, the other mills are like, no, we're selling it higher to other places. Why would we sell it to you for your flat rate? We'll sell you what you're under contract for, but any additional pulp, you have to pay the additional price.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there goes raises your overhead, because now you're paying more than what you were making on it, because it's a shorter term, so your price goes up. So, that's the dilemma that you run into with any business. But if you had other revenue coming in,
Yeah.
then you'd be able to subsidize that sort of problem. And I talked to him about issues of, there's 2 huge water tanks out front, having those cleaned up and having advertising put on them, to make money. Like the sign off of I-84, there's a big, painted sign on the side of the building. So you can do the same thing with the water, with those big water tanks out front. So there's
use some ideas.
Right, and that's what I told him. I said, I'll go out and help you what I can, and so we could get one of the advertising companies, that do the billboards, to jump in and say, hey, you know what, we'll do that. We'll come out and repaint that, put some advertising on you there, and give you a small part of the money for it. There's some more revenue coming in. There's options available. It's just that it's a team effort, and that's what I'm looking to do. So.
Okay. Anything on guns?
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Good.
I was just trying to figure out how to put that in there. Next month, I'm actually doing a fundraiser at Rich's Gun Shop. We're gonna have one evening. We're gonna have you can come in the gallery or the gun range. If you donate $50, you can come in and shoot. And you're helping me out, helping Rich out, and you get
Is this Rick's gun shop?
Rich's Gun Shop, yeah,
The one that
down in Donald.
the guy on the radio
Yep.
advertises.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Now I know what we're talking about.
Yep. No, we're I'm trying to team up with local businesses
Okay.
to help them out, help me out, to make it a win-win for both of us.
Sure.
So when you check out my website, I'll have it up. We haven't settled on a date yet, but it'll be next month. And so, yeah, I'm pro Second Amendment.
Yeah. Okay.
I talked to the NRA today and tried to get support, and they said, well, we don't support anybody till after the primary. And, And so,
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, they won't support anybody until after the primary, and then they'll only support someone they think that's going to win. So that's where I need everybody's support in the primary to help me win big, so they know they want to support me. But we also look at there's other gun associations here in Oregon that we were trying to be involved with and stand with. I was actually at the gun show down in Rickreall last
tell
week.
us a little more about that.
Yeah, I was at the gun show in Rickreall last week down in Polk County.
Oh, yeah.
So I met a lot of great people. There's a lot of great small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, gun dealers, there's a lot of. There's a lady that has purses that was selling purses there. There's people that sold hand cream. So there's a lot of other businesses just besides guns and knives, and there's a lot of opportunities to see the great small businesses in Oregon at work.
Okay.
So I'm a pro small business guy. Want to see them grow and see them be able to, their businesses to work.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's right. What will the fundraiser? What will you do with that, or is that what you were saying?
well, I'm trying to raise money for my campaign because I need yard signs and I need stickers
that
and
kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah. So those things don't come for free, and
That's
I don't
right.
have deep pockets like President Trump, so
Right.
I can't. I'm not starting with a big chunk of money in the bank, and Congressman Schrader has $1.4 million in the bank right now.
Your opponent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Democrat.
yeah.
Okay.
So I got to start from the bottom and work my way up, and that's what I'm working on.
Okay.
So, it's only 80,000 people donating $50 towards my campaign, which is what you have for an Oregon tax credit is $50 per person. So if you just take the advantage of your tax credit and donate to my campaign, then we'll be able to put up a good fight against Congressman Schrader. Or 760 businesses donated the $2,700 total.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure the math would bear that out, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think the key issue though is to show that once I've said something, that's what I'm going to do and not change. We've seen too much weak will or no spine in the Republican Party the last couple of years in Oregon.
Okay.
Stand by what you say or don't say it. And that's actually what got me into this race. I went last summer on a history trip with my son. Our last stop was Washington, D.C. We were sitting in the Congress in the gallery watching the congressman talk.
Okay.
Congressman Wyden gets up and announces a bill. It's a funding bill. Nothing really important. Points over to Congressman Schrader and goes, "Congressman Schrader, can you talk on this?" Congressman Schrader talked for 2 minutes, said, "I implore you, no matter what you do, vote for this bill. I want you to really take seriously thought in this and vote for this bill." He disappears off the floor. He's gone. Their votes are happening. It's going to pass, right?
You should read. You would want to read it, wouldn't you?
Well, you would, but it's going to happen. It's going to pass,
Okay.
right? So, yay for Congressman Walden. Republican thing. It's good. Congressman Schrader comes in and votes against it after he told everybody to vote for it. So here I'm with 18 high school kids, and I go, okay, well, hopefully you weren't paying attention because, here this congressman gets up and tells us we need to vote for something, then he votes against it.
Okay.
And you can check his vote. July 13th, he voted no on the bill. But you wouldn't know that he said to vote for it unless you were there. Unless you were watching C-SPAN or you were there in the Congress, you wouldn't know that he told everybody to vote for it. You would think he voted against it and did a party line vote.
Okay.
So, there's something that happened when he left, or it was a setup between him and Congressman Walden before to make it look like a bipartisan bill. I don't know. But the key thing is, I think people are looking for someone who's going to be honest, who's going to tell you what they think and stand by it.
Anytime.
The funny part of the story is I was telling my aunt about this, and she's hysterical. She's no nonsense. She's straight to the point. She's old school, raised on a farm and everything, but she's really liberal.
Okay.
I mean, but it's funny. I mean, we get along. We have our debates. I was telling her the story, and she looks at me and she goes, Rob, shut up and run, and I'll support you. Otherwise, quit whining.
Oh, okay.
You know, and
Okay.
so it's like if you have a complaint, get involved, and do something to change it. Don't
Okay.
just complain about it. So that was one of the key things that helped me decide to run for this position. And you know, I'm the youngest of 7 kids, so I know how to fight for what I want. I know
Okay.
how to negotiate for what I want.
Okay.
You know, so I think that this is a key opportunity for a change for the 5th district.
On the guns thing.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, it gets down to what everybody wants to stop everybody from buying them, so that only the criminals will have guns. Isn't that?
Well, that's the
It's a simplistic way of.
simplistic. I know that I've talked to people. I talked to one lady who was like, "Well, I don't want automatic weapons. I don't want people to have
Well,
automatic."
okay.
Well, they're illegal right now.
Well, we don't.
Most
if
people-
no one ever had any of them, that would be one thing.
Right. You know, but I mean, there are some people that have them, but you have to have special licenses to have them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the issue. The issue is people that shouldn't have guns that do. That's where we need to start.
That's right.
You know, if you can legally have it, then why am I taking it away from you?
I think mental issues are also
Right. Well, and that was the issue with the shooting in Texas. You know, the Air Force, you know, I'd kicked this guy out of the military, kicked
Yeah.
him out of the Air Force because of mental issues, and they forgot to report it to the FBI so that he couldn't buy weapons anywhere else. So, you know, there's a fall in the process. I mean, there's already a process to fix it, but if it's not used, then there's, you know, you need to go back and fix that. But yeah, I don't think. I mean, if you look at the NRA member that stopped the shooting in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was a guy barefoot came out with his gun, and shot the you know, the guy that started killing the people.
Cool.
You know, same with the shooting here at Clackamas Town Center a couple years back.
Yeah.
The reason the shooter stopped was because a guy with a gun came out and goes and pointed a gun at him and says, hey, you're going to stop. And so he took his own life because he knew that, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, the media doesn't bother to say that it was someone with a concealed carry that stopped it, you know. So,
Yeah.
you know, the focus needs to be on getting the people that illegally have guns and take their guns away, not the people that legally have them. So,
Well, it just seems to be so much out there that says, do something, do something. Well, that isn't that easy.
right.
It isn't that easy. And like you say, it's the guys that had the good guys that had the guns that came along at the right time. And
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Well, and if you're worried about something, I mean, and the problem is people don't research it out. I mean, because I had someone tell me yesterday, I was talking about this, you know, gun issues with somebody, and they go, well, all the people that have shot people are ex-military and stuff like that. We have one case of ex-military that I'm aware of, the guy in Texas, but he shouldn't be able to get a gun anyway. So, you know, all the other mass shootings haven't been ex-military people that I'm aware of. You know, they've been people with mental issues.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be our first thing to work on. And, you know, it's already there that if you have a mental problem, you're not supposed to be allowed to purchase weapons. But then you get into the HIPAA laws about not sharing medical what's going on with somebody. So that kind of puts a stop on, well, now your doctor can't tell anybody that you're having mental issues. So then what do you do?
And yet, we look at these situations and we say, gee, if we, people in authority, had the ability to move forward on that person that apparently showed all kinds of mental problems
Mm-hmm.
before he went crazy and killed people, That would have been great.
Right.
It isn't that simple, of course.
No, well, not everything's easy. But if it's worth
Yeah.
if it's worth fighting for,
Yeah.
it's something you got to work at. But taking everybody's guns away is not going to solve the problem. I mean, look at the other countries that don't allow guns. They still have, a high number of murders. That people just use other objects or other ways of doing it.
I think
So.
that happened in Australia or something. They took away guns, and there's just all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
I think that's what I remember reading about that.
Well, because people couldn't protect themselves.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I just don't care that much if I have a gun at all.
Right.
No real interest.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's where I'm at. I mean, almost all my family members are into hunting, and I've just never had an interest to do it.
Yeah.
But I mean, more power to the people who want to go out and spend a week out in the woods and get dirty and cold, and have to figure out how to drag a deer or elk back in or whatever. More power to them. I mean,
Right. Those are the people that we're gonna depend on,
right,
maybe
right,
at some point in time. That's right.
yeah. So. Yeah, the other big issue I think though in my campaign is taking care of vets.
Okay.
We need to make sure that the VA is working correctly.
We never did get to that. This would be a good time to mention that my co-host Bruce Broussard, who's trying to decide what to run for,
Right.
is not here because he went out to the airport to pick up a veteran and take him up to the Veterans Hospital. And I don't think, I know that it takes a while up there, and so I don't expect him back. He talked about being back about now, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm glad he was able to do that.
Right.
I was glad he was able to go do that.
Right.
Now, I brought him up for a reason. What was that? What's
Well,
that talking about?
we're talking about the vets and the VA.
The veterans, that's why.
and
he
making
was a veteran.
and making sure that the VA is run correctly so that our vets are taken care of and not dying because of not being taken care of.
That's right.
But the other issue with that is at least in Oregon, the Oregon National Guard doesn't have the latest equipment, military equipment for training.
Oh.
So they don't have the same equipment that they get when they go active. At least that's my understanding from what I've been told by their spokesman, that they don't have the latest equipment that they would get when they go active.
Okay.
So our congressman needs to go fight for that to make sure that that happens. The other issue that our congressman needs to fight for is we have 2 air bases here in Oregon. I don't know if you know, but the Klamath Falls Air Base is where all F-15 pilots come to train, or most F-15 pilots come to train. It's like the Top Gun
Okay.
training school.
Weren't they here once? A couple of them. That was
We
nice.
still have a patrol unit out of Portland.
Oh. Okay.
But the base down in Klamath Falls is a training, more of a training unit.
What's the name of that?
I should have that written down. It's the
That's all right. I was just.
so I called and spoke with their spokesman, the Air National Guard
Okay.
base down there, just to get an update on what was going on so that I could have a better answer
Okay.
for that, because the F-15 is going to go away because it's too old and needs to be repaired, and
Oh.
so they're looking at going with F-35, but yet our bases don't know what's going to happen to them. So I was talking with another military person last week, and he goes, well, that they have a plan set out for how they're going to buy the planes. There's a plan set out for, we're going to buy a certain number of planes per year, and they're going to go to these bases. So if that's already set out for 10 years out, why wouldn't our local bases know what's going to happen to them?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, they told me, well, we're ready for whatever mission we're given. But, they don't know rather they're going to be what they're going to be doing. And I think that's where our congressman could be going to the Pentagon and saying, hey, you know, I'd just like to know what's going on with my bases here in my state. Because it affects Klamath Falls, it affects Portland, but it affects our whole state because they guard this whole, from Bakersfield to Alaska, is what our air bases guard.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's pretty important. I mean, if they guard that much of our country, shouldn't we know what's going to happen? I mean, shouldn't we know what the plan is? Anyway, that's just my opinion that, you know, part of the taking care of the vets, you know, make sure the VA is set up and running, and then making sure all the programs we have set up for the vets
Right.
are the vets know about them.
I gotta tell you, this, like the veterans, these different veterans places, they're just great. They're just,
Right.
I don't know what else to say. And of course, a very small percentage of the populace really is veterans. I mean, there's
Right.
certainly some. I don't know if it's 1 or 2% or whatever it is. It's, but veterans should know that there's benefits are there.
Right.
Of course, that's what Bruce talks about. He talks about
Right.
these different, all these benefits, and that's important. And to tell them about them, so that they can find out and get hooked up,
Right.
even with the hospital, with that kind of thing. The more when they get hooked up, then at least they're in the system. That's
Right.
the word.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, you know, I mean, like I said, being a part of the American Legion, or being a part of, you know, the VFW, or, you know, whatever, just so you're involved in helping out, you know, it helps out other people, other veterans, you know, and that's, you know, the problem we see is that, you know, people get in their own corner, you know, because of whatever they're dealing with, and you need to have people to work with and people to help you out, and there's programs available.
Yeah.
So it's just let the vets know, and then, you know, having them let them know that we love them, we want to take care of them, and we appreciate, you know, their sacrifice, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We had a fellow on here that is involved with the Battle Buddies. Have you ever heard of that?
Huh.
Training dogs, and then turning them over to a veteran that needs one.
Oh.
A dog that's
Right.
been highly trained.
Right.
That's I've had 2 women on here talking about suicide stuff.
Yeah.
There's more than one group to do with this suicide business.
Right.
And I think it's time to get someone else back on. Bruce has been talking about benefits lately, so we've been talking about that.
Right.
And they have, like I said, he went up to the hospital with this vet, to the ER.
Right.
So they have an emergency room up there, and that's. As a matter of fact, I was just there.
Yeah.
I twisted my ankle. I
Yeah.
had to go to that emergency room. So that was very helpful to have that.
Yeah.
So, right. And I know that Trump was pushing for more help, but I think he probably was asking for too much. You're talking about $58 billion.
I know that he got a new director for the VA, and we'll see how he ends up doing.
Okay.
I don't know that he's been in his office long enough to really make the changes needed to be made. I know that they had some regulations that have been changed where you couldn't fire people for cause. So that's been changed. So that's a benefit.
Oh, okay.
So there's just some small things that kept people in their jobs no matter what they did, which is wrong. You know, if you can't do your job, you need to be replaced, you know. And that's that goes for any job, you know.
Okay.
So, but
Oh, that's right. Now, veterans have the burial benefits,
yeah.
all that kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
just things that people probably don't think that much about.
Yeah.
That's there too. And, mostly I think health benefits. I think there's ones for getting homes. Getting home loans,
Yeah, yeah. My brother-in-law is using his college benefit to get his master's degree.
Oh, okay.
So he did it as 20 and retired, but needed to get his master's degree to do what he wanted to do after he got out. So there's that benefit. But he served 20 years, so that's a long time he was a rescue helicopter pilot in the Navy, so.
Oh, okay.
Served a good career,
Right. Just
So
in there the whole. How long was he in?
20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, if you like what you're doing.
Well, he loved flying, so that was cool for him.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not the hardest thing in the world if that's.
As long as you enjoy it.
Yeah. Right.
So.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that there's a lot of help for veterans if they just would take it. I would hate to hear about somebody that had committed suicide because they didn't call when they could have called.
Right.
Or something like that. We never know. They don't put their names
Right.
anywhere.
Right. Right.
The only person that probably knows about that is the burial people up at.
Right. Yeah.
And that's.
Well, and that's why they need to get involved with the different organizations, because if
Yeah.
they're involved with the American Legion, these other organizations, then they're around people who can, see what's going on with them.
Yeah, American.
So there's the Eagles, there's the VFW, there's different organizations that they can get involved with
Right.
and be part of that are, they can, have fun and do stuff, and people can, you can create friendships.
Right. Right.
Because it's I think harder to fall off the wagon when you have friendships. People care about you. So I think that's a benefit that's missing out there. So.
We just had they had a veterans thing over in Vancouver the other day. I thought it was just great.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed going over there and had a good time and all that. Seeing they even had old time Army ambulances.
Oh wow.
That isn't what you call them. I don't think it's ambulance. And a lady dressed like a World War I nurse.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It was that was fun. I'll go next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to hear about that. Oh. Anyway.
So the other issue that's on my website is immigration.
Oh yeah.
People ask me what's my stance on DACA or the Dreamer Act, and for a while I didn't have an answer. Because I'm a caring person. I don't want to throw people out of the country.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But if we followed our laws and enforced our laws, there wouldn't be any issues. So it's about enforcing the laws we have, and then we can figure out the solutions for the other issues that are out there.
Okay.
So.
I think we're there. Again, my guest, Robert Reynolds, running 5th District congressional candidate. You go to him at www.reynolds, and then the letter 4, congress.com. Find out more about it. I want to thank our crew because couldn't do this without them. This is really appreciate that very much. And I'm glad you've come.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
I'm glad you came here.
Yeah.
So.